Hello and welcome to Education Scotland's The Pedagogy Podcast. I'm your host, Beck Stewart, and I will be leading us through some really interesting conversations around about pedagogy with a really wide and broad spectrum of educational professionals, children and young people. This podcast came about as a response to the OECD report, which found that in order to improve the quality of outcomes for our children, practitioners and teachers need to be supported to explore their own pedagogy and their practice through a pedagogical lens. Unsurprisingly, in the early years, it's been a focus, and so there's a lot of research and policy documents and research papers around about the subject of pedagogy. But as we move through the school stages and into secondary school and further education, that reference to pedagogy drops off. We'll be talking to a whole host of educational professionals from the early years through primary, young children and people from various different stages in their education, and then right into further education, exploring pedagogy, what it means to different people, and what we might change and what we might challenge ourselves around to ensure that our education meets the needs of our children and young people as we move into an exciting but unknown future.
Well, hello everyone. My name's Ollie Bray and I'm one of the strategic directors here at Education Scotland. And it is a huge delight and privilege to have an opportunity to interview a great friend and an inspiration of mine who I've worked with previously, and that's Dr Ben Mardell. And Ben will tell you a little bit about himself in a second, but in a nutshell, I would describe Ben as a teacher, as an early years specialist, as someone that's passionate about both play and triathlons, and his current job title is Principal Investigator at Project Zero, which is a research, institute as part of the Harvard Graduate School, of education. And Ben's joining us from his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts today, and I'm joining you from my Highland home in Kincraig in Scotland. So Ben, welcome to this podcast.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and having the opportunity to chat with you for a little bit. So thank
Great.
you.
Well, thank you. No, well, thank you. So we've got a few questions for you, Ben, if that's okay. And
yeah,
as
please.
I explained that this is a series of a few podcasts that we're doing, and we're hoping to ask, hoping to ask all the people that we interview the same sort of questions so that we can get a sort of feel around pedagogy, for the Pedagogy podcast. But before we do that, is I've given you a bit of a potted introduction there, but I just kind of wondered if you could tell the folks that are listening like a little bit maybe about yourself, your journey so far, and and how you came about finding yourself, I guess, at Project Zero and doing that sort of work.
Yeah. So it's not my trajectory to become a principal investigator at Project Zero was not a straightforward or necessarily planned one. I was an economics major at university, but unlike most of my colleagues, didn't want to go to Wall Street or have that kind of career, but really was motivated by my political beliefs of the economics and thinking about equity and how the production of the economy could be distributed more fairly. And so I left, when I graduated, I became a community organizer. But unfortunately, I wasn't very good at it. And so I left that and I needed a job. And this was a moment, and it still is the case in the US, where unfortunately you didn't need a lot of qualifications to get a job working with young children. And so I found myself working with 3-year-olds and found that I loved it. It was something that I enjoyed. I was fairly good at, though I needed training to get much better at. But it also fulfilled my politics, that I was working with the future and helping young people develop a sense of their agency and future possibilities. So I went back, I got my credentials in teaching. I worked worked with young kids, 3, 4, 5-year-olds mostly, have gone back and forth between the classroom and being a teacher educator and being a researcher, and finally have found my way to Project Zero, which is a great place. I work with really smart people, but really nice people, and doing really interesting projects in a range of educational endeavors. So
that's great, Ben. And actually, I've known you for a number of years now, but I had never realised that you did an economics major to start with. So I've learned something else about you today as well. I just suppose, Ben, just for the listeners' benefit, and you're a very humble man, is one of the things that I was saying. It'll probably embarrass you terribly for me to say that, around that, but maybe could you just sort of say a few words of the work that you did with the Boston Schools District on the early years, curriculum? Because I think that people would be interested in that.
Right. So Boston Public Schools is a big urban district. I think it might be like somewhat comparable to Edinburgh in that there's, I think, maybe 90 different elementary primary schools in Boston under the district, where most I think the figure is around 70% of the children come from families that are qualified for the under poverty guidelines of here in the U.S. and then a range of cultural groups. So I think there's over 100 home languages in the Boston Public Schools. But at some point about 10 years ago, the head of the early childhood department was trying to find a curriculum for kindergarten and preschool for the 5-year-olds and the 4-year-olds, and wasn't satisfied with anything that he could find out there. And so the department decided to create their own curricula, and they brought me and a few colleagues, Dr. Magina Baker, who's also on the Pedagogy Play project, and we helped develop what is called now Focus on K2, which was that grade. And I think some of the things that I'm most proud of about that work is first, what the image of the child is, which I think is something that you think about in Scotland as well, as a both capable, not a deficit model of the child, but with building on child strengths in the curriculum, but also taking the child as not a citizen in training or a citizen in the future, but a current citizen, both in their classroom, school, but even in the community. So something that happens in that curriculum is that each January or so, kids get a letter from the mayor of the city inviting them to think together with their classmates about how to make Boston, the city of Boston, more fair and fun, and a more fun place for children, and to create some kind of construction, because the unit actually of inquiry at that point is around construction, that would represent that. And kids have so many interesting things. From things that you might imagine, like more candy shops, but actually, from looking at across of now a number of years, more than half of them have to do with social justice, places for homeless people, ways that families can visit their sick relatives in hospitals, that are really, I think, speak to kids' sense of empathy and awareness. One of my favorites is a park where where family members will play with their children, and that has two basic features. The one is a place to store adults' technology, so they won't be sitting on their cell phones while in the park. So there's lockers, but also it's not just punitive. There's a lot of features in this park that make it more pleasant for adults to play. So adult-sized play equipment, sprinklers to cool off in the hot summer days for their a snack bar with healthy foods, so you don't have to go home for lunch. As some of the creations that 5-year-old kids have come up with that I think are really interesting and clever. So
I love all of that, and I love the way that you enthusiastically retell the stories of from the imagination and the and the creations of of children, and you're absolutely right. What you're describing there really resonates with some of the work that we're doing in Scotland. The importance of of agency, the image of the child, and I love how you describe that your children as citizens of the of the classroom, of the school, but also of the local community, and it's a lovely I guess sort of twist, but also buy-in from local government that the mayor writes personal letters to the children each year around that. Just fantastic. So Ben, this is the pedagogy podcast, as we've sort of said already. And I know that you've done a lot of thinking about pedagogy over the years, both within your own practice, but also helping others develop their practice as well. But one of the things that we've discovered is actually the term pedagogy means many different things to many different people, around that. And it's something that we could spend probably hours discussing. But just intrigued, like in terms of your view and your experience, what does the term pedagogy mean to you?
So I would define it as an intentional approach to teaching and learning that educators hold. So it goes beyond curriculum, which is the specific activities, to a broader way that you're with that teachers and school leaders are with the young people in their school community. So certainly it is like concrete activities, but it's also how do you interact? How do you, the culture that you try to form within a school, within a classroom. I guess to take your question a little bit farther, like then how do you do that? What do educators need? I think maybe the three things that we think about on the Pedagogy Play project are providing people a kind of a framework, a theory that helps them be intentional. Like, why am I doing things? It's not just following a set of recipe directions, but really an understanding about what thinking and learning involves, child development, that kind of thing, that helps guide those interactions. And then there's really concrete practices and strategies that you can use, as well as some tools, so that can ground and you can hold on to. So it's the big picture, but it's also an understanding of a very specific micro moves that you can make is what to me creates a solid pedagogy.
I think it's like super interesting, like how you've described that as well, because again, I think that resonates with me, is that pedagogy, is about the culture that you create as much as as much as the practice that you that you pursue. And and I think there'll be a chance to chat a little bit more about the Pedagogy Play project in a minute. But something which Project Zero as a whole, and certainly the work that you're involved in, has always been very good at, as taking that conceptual layer around that, helping people unpick it in terms of their local context. I mean, I remember a term that you taught me years ago, which is hit the ground listening, to meet people where they around that, and then giving people practical tools to be able to use in their classrooms, or indeed giving people practical tools which they can then use to co-create their own tools to make that work for the young people they've got in front of them in their community. So that's just great. So I suppose moving on, we've mentioned Pedagogy Play one or two times already, and some of the listeners will probably be wondering what we mean by that. So this question maybe lends itself to that a little bit. So when thinking about pedagogy, what has inspired your thinking the most?
So maybe I'll talk about a few other things apart from Pedagogy and Play. Maybe then I can share a little bit about the Pedagogy of Play and what that involves. But I think that kind of in the big picture, the work of Lev Vygotsky, the Soviet era psychologist, and his idea of scaffolding and support, that thinking and learning is higher level thinking and learning is a social phenomenon, and so that human beings, young people, they're constructing their own understandings, but they're constructing it alongside other people. That's with adults, with peers, with their siblings, with their classmates in school, and so that really all higher level thinking is first manifested it in a social sphere, and then people then take those tools that they see and learn, be that language, be that writing, be that math, and then and make that their own. But an understanding that that thinking and learning is not just an individual endeavor, I guess, is something that I was brought up in a schooling system that it was like you're supposed that it's individuals that success, but it really is both to be a successful student, but also a successful teacher involves being part of a community and learning with and from other people. And that's beautifully manifested in the work of in the preschools and infant toddler centers of Reggio Emilia, Italy, which I know that's many of you are familiar with. In fact, that it's been an inspiration in Scotland as well as in the United States, where it's I guess when I first encountered Reggio, I put it this way: like in the U.S. And maybe I think in the UK, if you think of Thatcher era kind of ideology, it's like all about the individual. And then in some, maybe in Asian countries, it's like all about the group. Reggio was a beautiful place where it's both about the individual and the group, and that it's not being part of a group isn't losing your individual rights, it's actually gaining possibilities by a group that's supporting you and holding you and both emotionally, but also in terms of your learning. And that's what school should be about, in my mind. And I think that's hopefully what we bring that into that spirit into the pedagogy of play and our work there. So.
And can you? That's great, Ben. And you're right. Like Reggio, has really inspired like our work, here in Scotland. And I mean, I know that you've visited many times, and I've visited one or two times. It's a pretty inspiring place to actually kind of visit, in terms of the work they do, and both within the schools, but also within the kind of centre that they've got there, and the teacher training, institute that they run there. Really, really quite amazing how the whole city really has got behind education, in particular. Yes. Early years education. That's the really powerful part of it. I think. Could you talk a little bit about the actual the Pedagogy of Play project and how that work has developed?
Yes, absolutely. So just the basics are that the Pedagogy of Play started in 2015. It's a collaboration between Project Zero and the Lego Foundation, aimed at reconceptualizing and reimagining what learning in schools could involve. In particular, how to bring more play and playfulness into the school experience in the early years, but through high school as well. And we've done research in Denmark, in South Africa, in the US, and in Colombia, to really understand both looking at three main questions. Why do you need a pedagogy of play? What does playful learning look and feel like? And then how do you do it, both as a teacher and a school leader? And let me say a little bit about each. So why do you need a pedagogy? Well, there's a growing body of evidence that play and playfulness supports learning, from anything from animal behavior to neuroscience to classroom research to developmental psychology. The ability to play and be playful, which in my mind isn't something frivolous, but it's where the learner has agency. They're exploring the unknown and they're finding joy in their learning, really is supportive of learning processes. But what happens, trying to bring that into school isn't simple or straightforward, because actually the nature of school and the nature of play can sometimes be at odds. So what do I mean by that? Play is messy and loud and chaotic. Schools aspire to be places of order, not for bad reasons. It's because many of us, welcomes a sense of quiet or order, and some kids absolutely need that predictability in order to be successful learners. In play, the players are in charge. In school, we have learning goals for young people that are really important, that we want to that shouldn't be discarded. And so what I would argue is that it's not we shouldn't see these as either or, that we can either have wild, crazy play, or we can have places of order, but that these are things to try to navigate. And in order to navigate that you need a pedagogy that is both an individual teacher can use, but a group of teachers can use together to create that kind of culture where students are seeing the school as a place where they can take initiative, where they can try things out, where they can take risks, where they can explore, where making mistakes is not seen as failure, but it's part of the game that you're playing, and you try and then you try again. And that's what school becomes about. And having a pedagogy will help that happen. What does it look like? Well, it looks like different things in different places in the world. So in Denmark, the teachers would say that it looks like students having choice, a sense of wonder and delight. In South Africa, teachers talk a lot about empowerment and enjoyment, but also the social dimension of learning is so important that it's grounded on the South African philosophy of Ubuntu, which is that I am a person through other people. So I'm feeling a sense of empowerment, not because I'm just an individual taking charge, but I'm with a group of my friends and colleagues who are learning together. And that leads me to feel empowered, or the sense of joy that I have in learning is based on that. So there's some universals about what playful learning looks like, and the places that we've studied. And I can't claim that this is true everywhere in the world because we haven't studied everywhere in the world, but in the places that we have, there is a sense of agency or directedness, that the learners are leading their learning, they're exploring their unknown, and that they're finding delight or joy in learning. Seems to be commonalities, but how that's manifested really it depends on the school and the culture and the values and goals of the educators, of the families in those particular places. So I would say that part of a pedagogy of play is defining for yourself and your school community what playful learning involves. And actually doing that can be a really useful process for educators, because it helps you become specific of what you're trying to do. And then how do you do that? Well, we have a set of 4 classroom practices and also some school-wide practices, but it involves creating a sense where there's a sense of learning together within a classroom, a sense that the classroom is a place where you take risks and you try and you experiment, and in fact, where all emotions are welcomed into the classroom. Certainly we lean into joy, because at least when we started the project and we looked at schools in our local area, joy was often missing, sadly, and that was felt important. But when you play is also, you can get frustrated, you can get angry, you can get mad, and you can't have actually welcome positive emotions and ignore the negative emotions. That there's going to be conflict, and there's when you're really talking about real stuff. But that the teacher welcomes that and helps kids figure that out is actually part of what we think is pedagogy of play, but also democratic education, where kids are learning to argue productively with each other. And so we have a number of strategies and then teaching tools that support educators who want to go on this journey and lean into this kind of teaching.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Again, that's all it's all great to kind of hear. And one of the things I really enjoy about some of the pedagogy of play research is the notion of playful practices, but within the confines, of a school. Around this, you're not trying to completely reinvent and transform education. You're just trying to help nudge people and practitioners and children in the right direction. And I love the way that you describe the things as paradoxes, and the one that you gave between, schools are inherently safe, but play is inherently kind of risk taking.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that schools should be safe all the time or really risky or dangerous, but actually it's about finding the balance at the right time for that young person or that school setting. And the other bit that's really made me think over a number of years about your research is around the indicators. So you talked about choice, wonder, and delight. In Denmark, in South Africa, that looks a little bit different. But the word delight is quite similar to the word enjoyment. And I know that in some of the cultural framework maps that you create, you talk about what do these words look and feel like around that. And I think that's clever as well. And it's creating that language around the pedagogy, which then actually helps people talk about the same thing about the pedagogy rather than use the same words but talk about different things. And that I think is really clever, like how that's been built up over time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, because in the early years, my particular field, we talk about play as the way children learn, or there's phrases like play is the work of children. But when you probe that, people have different ideas of what play means. For some, it involves free play and just children doing what they want to be doing. For some, there's this term guided play, where adults are more involved. For some, that might be games. Like, okay, we want to teach math, and we have some kind of activities that are games. For some, it's playing with ideas. If you want to have a group of educators working on what to push playful learning and create this culture, a very first step is to have a common understanding of what you mean by playful learning. And so you're not working across purposes, and you can articulate to both kids and to their families what we're talking about here. And I think the indicators provide that for a group of teachers. So you can clearly say more, or you can more specifically say what we mean by playful learning and what are some of the things kids might be feeling and what you might be seeing. So you might be seeing kids moving around, having freedom to move their bodies, or to be arguing and debating with each other, or asking questions that take things further. So that's, I think, some of the usefulness of having these indicators that we've created.
I think again, I think it's great, just that bit around the common language to associate the pedagogies, so important. So we're nearly at the end, Ben. You'll probably be pleased to
No.
Just I guess sort of two final questions really, and the first one is you've given us a great sort of run through of, I guess, your journey to get here and some of your ongoing work and some of your thoughts and feelings. You've been very generous with your time, but what's next for you around that? What are you going to be working on next? Apart from a much needed festive vacation, no doubt.
Well, the next few months are finishing up our book that we're writing. That's going to be available online and for free at the end of March. We're going to be doing some outreach, but when the project ends at the end of August of 2023, I'm actually going to be returning to the classroom and working with 4 or 5-year-olds again. I'm really interested in being with young people again, and having those kind of relationships that teachers have. I'm particularly interested in sustainability and how to. I think that's one of the main issues of our time, and so helping young people think about and engage with what the climate crisis involves for them. But so that will be part of my work. But certainly, being with little kids again is something I'm really looking forward to.
I just think that's great, and again that I think really helps the people that are listening understand you as a person, and what you really believe in. So thanks for that. So last question, but you get 2 answers. You're pleased to know. So one of the things that we did when we were creating Realising the Ambition is we had a playlist that accompanied it, that was different songs that were suggested by different members of the community and the people that were involved. And we're going to create a playlist for this podcast series as well. So if you were to pick sort of 2 inspirational songs that might be part of this playlist, what might they be, Ben, and why?
I love that question. Music, I think, is a universal, and but what I'll do, I guess I'll answer the question in a little bit, maybe not precisely, but more generally, in giving you 2 bands that I'm currently listened to, and historically have listened to. And then one of them is called Dreamers Circus. And they're actually a Danish band that I often listen to, and it's just a funny story. I was playing this actually at work, and some guy was fixing the light bulbs. There's a lot of Irish immigrant families in the Boston area, and he said, "Oh, you're playing Irish music?" So no, the Danes, but those Vikings were everywhere. So it might sound to you, and to folks in Scotland, when you listen to Dreamer Circus, that it might sound like Scottish music as well, and but it's just I find it just reaches my heart in a way that fans sometimes do. And the other is, and this is a long-standing favorite, but anything by the Talking Heads, that 80s group. There's just an energy there to David Byrne and that music that just wakes me up, gets my feet tapping, and it's just it's just fun to dance to. David Byrne, I guess, said once in a concert in Germany, because one of the things about the Talking Heads is that their lyrics don't always make sense, but or are not straightforward. But he said to a group in Germany in English, which is a little ironic, he said, "If you dance, you'll understand the music better." So I think it's good advice in general. So.
I love that. I love that. If you dance, you'll understand the music better. I love that. That's brilliant. Ben, that's got to the end of our conversation. So listen, thanks so much for taking part this afternoon, or this morning for you. I know that you're in Boston. We're in 2 different time zones. It's always great to chat. And for the folks that are sort of tuning in and listening, this is obviously one of a series of podcasts. But Ben's mentioned a few resources there as we went along, linked to the Pedagogy Play project. He's also mentioned the book that's going to be coming out in 2023, which is going to be free and online. So we'll make sure that we post those resources in the show notes as well. But Ben, just what I wanted to say, thanks for being such a great friend personally, but also a friend to Scotland. We thoroughly enjoyed your visit recently to Edinburgh schools, and good luck with the holidays and finishing the book, and then your return to teaching children, because we know what you're fascinated by and enthusiastic by, and we look forward to catching up with you soon, either in Boston or in Scotland. So thank you so much.
That would be great, and it's just a pleasure always talking to you and spending time. But also, I just have to. I often tell my friends after my visit to Scotland that I have Scottish envy, that you guys are doing just amazing things, and I think it's inspirational to folks in the U.S. but everywhere about how, as a system, that you're moving education that really is responding to the needs of young people in such an important way. So thank you for your work as well. So
listening to that conversation between Ben and Ollie was fascinating, and it made me really reflect on a couple of key themes that keep coming up in these conversations. That idea that play involves agency, and being playful in learning involves children and young people being able to lead their own learning and follow their own interests. And that idea that it is around a co-construction and sits within the social sphere. So it's not just an individual endeavour, it's around about co-construction with the adults in the space and with other children and young people in their space. That idea that pedagogy is an intentional approach to what we do, but it's also relational and it's also fluid. So how we respond to various different situations is informed by our pedagogy, which is then sits on top of our values and our understanding of theory and research, and how we've all internalized that to come to our own professional identity. And that actually the most successful settings and the most successful schools are where there has that shared language around pedagogy and that shared understanding. That definition contextualized within each school is so important, and means that we can then really build something special with our children and young people. The idea that choice and wonder and delight should be a kind of base part of what we do really resonates with me. And I love that concept of Ubuntu, the fact that I am in relation to others and through others. And again, I think we need to consider how those kinds of concepts can inform our practice and what we do. So interesting, that idea between the order and chaos of school and play. I don't think they're quite so diametrically opposed, but I can see the tensions there, and how we navigate those tensions is really important, and is based upon all of that thinking that we've done before. And just, the idea of becoming rather than being. So everything is about becoming. It is about a continual process. It's not an end product ever. And our approach to how we learn and how we teach and how we relate to others will continue to evolve. Absolutely, really thought-provoking stuff from Ollie and Ben there. Pedagogy of Play is worth checking out. They have a website there, and there'll be links to the various different things that Ben referenced in the show notes. Thanks very much for listening, and in the spirit of collaboration, please do get in touch using the hashtag #ESPedagogyPodcast to let us know your thinking, to pose questions, to tell us how this has impacted on you and your practice. Thanks very much for listening, and goodbye for now.